that made English sound inadequate. Queen Zephyra awaits you in Workshop 7. Please proceed directly. And avoid touching any unmarked surfaces. That last instruction did nothing to ease Jake's nerves. Adjusting his toolkit strap, he started down the crystalline corridors, reminding himself why he was here. Human engineers had learned to imitate alien machines. They had not learned how to repair them, much less the biomechanical wonders of the Astrian Empire, weapons and armor that fused directly with the nervous systems of their wielders. To be summoned to work on Queen Zephyra's own armor meant one of two things: either he had been judged exceptionally skilled, or entirely expendable. Workshop 7 resembled a medical suite more than a repair bay. Holographic readouts floated like translucent banners in the air, Astrian script twisting across them in sharp lines and glowing curves that made his eyes ache if he looked too long. In the center of the chamber stood Queen Zephyra herself, motionless, statuesque, and radiating the kind of authority that bent reality around her. Jake set his toolkit down and bowed, careful to balance formality with respect. "Your Majesty," the Queen's attention turned to him with a focus so sharp it felt like being targeted. Tall even by Astrian standards, Zephyra carried the unmistakable marks of her royal lineage, elongated ears etched with ritual scars, ceremonial yet formidable. Her armor was no mere suit. It shimmered and shifted as though it were molten metal, alive and vigilant, hugging her form with both grace and lethal promise. "Captain," she replied, her voice wrapping the simple word in music and danger. "I am told you have experience with biomechanical integration systems." "Some," Jake admitted, opening his case. "Though nothing on this level. Human technology can't compare to this. Your armor's integration with your nervous system, it's beyond anything we've achieved." Zephyra's expression didn't change, though her silence made him feel the weight of judgment. Was honesty refreshing to her, or simply proof of human inadequacy? "The armor bonds with us during the maturation ceremony," she explained, each word measured. "It becomes part of our bodies. It responds to thought and emotion as naturally as breathing. Repairs, therefore, are complicated." Jake's gaze slid to the faint scorch marks along her left side. Cracks traced jagged patterns across the sleek surface like fractures in living crystal. "That's battle damage," he said quietly. "Indeed. My technicians cannot repair it while it remains bonded to me. Yet removing it risks neural feedback severe enough to kill. That is why I require the assistance of someone whose nervous system is incompatible." Jake almost laughed. "Because if something goes wrong, I'm the only one who won't be fried by feedback." "Bluntly stated," Zephyra said, her eyes narrowing in faint amusement. "But accurate." She stepped onto a crystalline platform that unfolded from the floor like a blooming flower. The light bathed her in pale radiance, catching every gleam of liquid metal as her armor shifted to accommodate the diagnostics. "Your task is simple in theory: repair and recalibrate the damaged pathways while I maintain conscious control over its reactions." Jake exhaled and unpacked his tools. Against the elegant alien designs surrounding him, his instruments looked clumsy, primitive. "I'll need your guidance through the interface protocols. And fair warning, this is going to require physical contact with your armor." "I am aware," Zephyr replied, though there was a flicker of apprehension beneath her regal calm. Her elongated ears shifted subtly, betraying emotions her voice would not. "I have reviewed your record, Captain. Precision and discretion, those qualities matter more to me than bravado." Jake felt an uninvited heat rise to his face. She knew about his work, which meant she also knew he was one of the few humans who refused to treat alien technology as something to exploit. He had respected the boundaries. And now he was standing inches from a queen whose armor responded to her heartbeat, her thoughts, her very emotions. "Then I'll be careful," he promised, moving closer. "And I'll explain every step before I take it." Up close, the armor's intricacies overwhelmed him. Along Zephyra's neck, wrists, and ribs, crystalline nodes pulsed with a rhythm that mirrored her vitals. Each was a neural anchor, a living bridge between queen and machine. The damaged section still shimmered with faint heat scars. Jake touched the surface with a scanning probe. At once, the armor rippled and Zephyra inhaled sharply. The sound was faint, but in the quiet crystalline chamber it echoed like confession. Neural feedback, she said quickly, her voice taut with control. The armor interprets external contact as potential threat. I must override its defensive instincts. Jake withdrew instinctively. Should I? No, her answer was immediate. Continue. I will adapt. He nodded once, then returned to work, guiding microscopic manipulators into the fractured neural pathways. Each touch demanded Zephyra's full mental focus. She had to hold her armor back from lashing out, while he threaded repairs inside a living network that pulsed with her very essence. Fascinating, Jake muttered as bioluminescent patterns spread across the armor with every probe. The microcircuitry isn't manufactured. It's grown. Each pathway, unique to you. The bond begins in adolescence, Zephyra explained, her voice steadier now as she adjusted to the rhythm. It grows with us, learning our thoughts, our fears, even our dreams. By adulthood, it knows us more intimately than any other being could. Jake paused, struck by the intimacy of her words. That's not armor, he said softly. That's a second consciousness. You're sharing your mind with it. Zephyra's lips curved faintly. Do humans not also bond with their machines? I have seen pilots insist their ships have personalities. Engineers swear their computers develop preferences. Jake gave a small laugh. Fair, but our ships don't read our emotional states in real time. Perhaps they should, Zephyra countered, her tone carrying quiet conviction. The armor knows when I am angry, when I am afraid, when I am distracted. It prevents errors born of weakness. The implication lingered in the silence between them. Jake realized with a start that right now the armor was monitoring her emotions, which meant it was aware of what she was feeling about him. He cleared his throat, forcing focus back to the tools in his hands. Anything I should be aware of, Your Majesty? Her ears flickered with rapid color patterns before she answered. The armor records heightened stress, consistent with unfamiliar circumstances. Jake concentrated on sealing the first neural fracture. There, he said after a few tense minutes. That pathway's stable. You should feel improved response on the left lateral systems, Zephyra moved experimentally. The armor flowed like quicksilver around her, responding with seamless precision. Remarkable. The feedback lag has lessened significantly. Jake gave a brief smile. The microfractures were creating interference, like trying to talk through static. This next section's deeper, though. He hesitated before continuing, realizing the next repair meant working closer to the Queen's torso, dangerously close to where her life support systems merged with her heart and lungs, and so his hands moved toward the curve of her ribs, where alien armor pulsed softly in time with her heartbeat. Each touch demanding trust neither of them had planned for. Jake's instruments hovered just above the Queen's ribcage, the scanners humming as they mapped fractures that were dangerously entangled with her life-supporting conduits. The bioluminescent patterns there glowed brighter, pulsing in sync with her heartbeat. Each flare of light a reminder that one mistake could stop the heart of the most formidable warrior in the galaxy. He steadied his breathing, forcing his hands to remain calm even as the enormity of the moment pressed down on him. This section is delicate, he murmured. The armor's pathways are woven directly into your cardiovascular functions. If I misalign one connection, it could disrupt your heart rhythm. Zephyra regarded him without flinching. Then you must not misalign it. Her voice was calm, but her elongated ears betrayed the flicker of stress patterns. The Queen of the Astrians was no stranger to danger, yet this was not a battlefield she could command. Here, trust in a human engineer was her only defense. Jake swallowed, leaning closer. The crystalline nodes beneath his hands thrummed, and the armor responded to his presence with defensive ripples as if recognizing an intruder. He felt the resistance through his tools like pushing against a living muscle. Zephyra inhaled slowly, then closed her eyes. Her voice lowered, almost intimate. I will hold it back. Work quickly. As Jake activated the micro-manipulators, the armor fought him with reflexive surges. Each time it recoiled, Zephyr's muscles tensed as if struck, her lips tightening in silent effort to suppress the reaction. Their partnership became a strange duet, her mental discipline opening fragile windows of opportunity, his precision exploiting them to weave fractured circuits back into harmony. Sweat beaded along his brow despite the cool chamber air. "You weren't exaggerating," Jake muttered. "This armor really does feel alive?" "It is alive," Zephyr corrected softly, her voice edged with exertion. "Not in the way you think, but it grows, it remembers. It knows me." Jake's hand slipped fractionally, grazing a node that pulsed violently in response. Zephyr gasped, her eyes snapping open, bioluminescent veins flaring across her armor as the system tried to seize control back from her will. Jake instantly pulled his tool away. "Did I hurt you?" he asked sharply. Her breathing steadied. "No, but the armor read your hesitation as aggression. You must move with confidence. It senses intention as much as contact." Jake blinked, his stomach tightening. "It senses me." Not just his hands or his tools, it was reading him, peering through the connection to judge his intent. He flexed his fingers, realizing that his emotions, his thoughts, might bleed into the armor just as hers did. "All right," he said at last, his voice low and steady. "Then let's both trust each other." "You hold it steady." "I'll keep my hands sure." The Queen inclined her head, a subtle gesture of acceptance. And so they resumed, closer than ever, his fingers working near the rise of her ribs, each touch sparking faint glimmers across the armor's surface. Zephyr remained silent, her focus absolute, but Jake couldn't shake the awareness that every adjustment was no longer just mechanical, it was personal, as if he were reaching into a space no outsider had ever been permitted. When the final fracture sealed with a shimmer of stable light, Jake withdrew slowly. The armor's glow softened, settling into a steady rhythm. Zephyr exhaled in controlled relief, and for the first time, the chamber felt still. "You did it," she said, her voice softer than before, almost carrying warmth. Jake nodded, too drained to smile. "One section at least. But there's more. And each step deeper brings me closer to—" "Well, you?" Zephyr's gaze lingered on him, unreadable yet intent. "Then perhaps, Captain Reeves, you are beginning to understand why Astrian warriors do not easily allow another to touch their armor." The weight of her words sank in. He wasn't just repairing technology. He was trespassing in something sacred, a bond that defined not just her strength but her identity. And with every adjustment, he was being allowed further inside than any outsider had ever gone. Asterisk. The next diagnostic scan painted a far more daunting picture. The fractures weren't confined to surface pathways anymore. They laced deeper, threading through nodes along Zephyr's spine where the armor was most intimately fused with her nervous system. These were not just conduits for strength and reflex. They regulated balance, adrenaline, even the fine rhythm of her heartbeat. Touching them would mean laying his hands on the very junction where Queen and armor ceased to be two separate things. Jake hesitated, his fingers hovering above the glowing image projected in the air. "This next section." He exhaled slowly. "It's connected directly to your spinal pathways. If I misstep here, Your Majesty, the feedback won't just sting, it could paralyze you." Zephyr's elongated ears flickered with a slow, deliberate pattern. Her gaze was steady, her voice level. "And yet, Captain Reeves, it must be done. A queen who cannot command her armor cannot lead her people. I have faced death on the battlefield many times. This is no different." The words struck him harder than he expected. She wasn't afraid, not of him, not of the risk. But he was. For the first time, Jake realized that if he failed here, the galaxy would lose its most formidable leader. And he would be the one responsible. He stepped closer, kneeling beside the platform so his tools could align with the nodes at the base of her spine. The crystalline matrix pulsed faintly beneath the armor, a soft glow that mapped itself along the curve of her back. He could see where the impact damage had caused hairline fractures in the conduits, sending chaotic signals through her nervous system. "This is going to require direct contact," Jake said quietly. "The manipulator arms won't be stable enough at this angle. I'll have to—" Use my hands. Zephyr turned her head slightly, meeting his eyes. For a long moment she studied him, weighing something unspoken. Then she inclined her head in a single regal nod. I trust you. Jake swallowed hard. Those 3 words carried more weight than any medal, any commendation he had ever earned. His palms hovered, then pressed lightly against the living metal at the small of her back. The sensation jolted through him, not cold or hard, but warm, pulsing, almost like touching living skin that hummed with energy. The armor responded instantly, light flaring in defensive patterns, and Zephyr drew in a sharp breath as she fought to suppress its instincts. Steady, she whispered, her voice controlled but edged with strain. It feels you. Jake forced his own heartbeat to slow, focusing on calm intent. He worked methodically, threading a repair probe into the first fractured node, adjusting its crystalline lattice back into alignment. Each movement sent faint tremors rippling through the armor, and each tremor echoed in Zephyr's body. Her shoulders stiffened, her hands clenched, but she said nothing. The intimacy of it was overwhelming. He wasn't just fixing a machine. Every adjustment carried into her nerves, her breath, her pulse. At times, he felt her body react before she spoke, a twitch of muscle, a quickening of breath, as though he had crossed a line between technician and something far closer. Another pathway sealed, Jake murmured, pulling his probe free. Signal strength is stabilizing. Zephyr released a long, slow breath, her posture easing by a fraction. The pain is gone, she admitted, her voice softer than before. For weeks, I have carried its weight without showing weakness. And now it is lighter. Jake sat back slightly, though his hands still hovered near her armor, reluctant to break the connection. He met her gaze, and for the first time, the intensity in her eyes wasn't only that of a queen evaluating a subordinate. It was something else, quieter, more personal. You risked much allowing me this close, he said quietly. Zephyr's ears flickered, with a pattern he hadn't yet learned to read. Perhaps, she replied. Or perhaps it is you who risks more, Captain Reeves. Few who touch an Astrian queen's armor leave unchanged. Her words lingered in the chamber's crystalline silence. And as Jake prepared to tackle the final, most critical repairs, he realized that she might be right. He had stepped into a space forbidden to almost anyone, and something about the bond forming between them was becoming as unpredictable as the technology he was repairing. The deeper Jake pushed into the diagnostic data, the more the complexity unfolded like a living labyrinth. The damage reached the core junctions, a nexus of neural pathways threaded through Zephyr's spinal matrix, where armor and queen were fused in a bond more intimate than flesh. Repairing these fractures required more than physical tools. The armor was rejecting his instruments, recoiling with instinctive hostility every time he attempted to stabilize the core conduits. He pulled his hands back, frustration tight in his chest. It's not letting me in. The system recognizes me as an intruder, and every probe I use it treats like an attack. Zephyr, seated still as a statue on the crystalline platform, regarded him with cool, steady eyes. Then you must convince it otherwise, Jake frowned. Convince. The armor? Her elongated ears flickered with subtle color patterns as she explained. The bond is not purely mechanical. It responds to intention, emotion, trust. It senses the difference between threat and care. My will restrains it, but the final repairs are too deep. I cannot suppress its instincts without breaking my own bond. If you are to succeed, Captain Reeves, the armor must believe in you as I do. Jake's heart pounded. He wasn't repairing a machine anymore. He was asking for acceptance from something that was, essentially, a living extension of the Queen herself. How do I make it believe in me? He asked. Zephyr's expression was unreadable. You must allow a partial synchronization. Briefly, the armor will taste your nervous system, your emotions, your truth. If it accepts you, the pathways will open. If it rejects you, she paused, her voice quieter but sharp as steel, then the feedback will burn you from within before I can intervene. Silence filled the chamber, broken only by the low hum of the diagnostic displays. Jake swallowed hard. He had repaired weapons under fire, patched ships while vacuum threatened to tear them apart, but never had he been asked to risk his very mind this way. Yet the Queen's calm gaze held him, steady and unwavering. She was entrusting him with more than her armor, with her body, her survival, perhaps her throne. "All right," Jake said at last, his voice firm despite the tension coiling in his gut. "Show me what I need to do." Zephyra extended a hand, her armored palm shimmering as though the living metal shifted in anticipation. "Place your hand here. The armor will read you. Do not resist it. Do not lie to it. Machines may be deceived, but not this one." Jake hesitated only a moment before pressing his bare palm against the flowing surface. The contact jolted through him like electricity, but instead of pain it was sensation, a flood of impressions not his own. He felt the armor's awareness brush against his thoughts, alien yet curious, probing deeper with every heartbeat. For a moment, panic surged in him, and the armor responded with defensive spikes of energy, making his muscles seize. "Calm," Zephyra commanded softly, her hand covering his. Her presence steadied him, her voice anchoring him like a fixed point in the storm. "Let it see you. Let it know your intent." Jake forced himself to breathe, to focus on the truth of why he was here. He wasn't here to conquer or exploit. He wasn't here for glory. He was here because someone had trusted him to protect her, to preserve something precious that only he could touch. Slowly, the panic ebbed, and the surge of energy flowing between his mind and the armor softened. The living metal's hostility faded into cautious acceptance. The armor opened. He felt it like a door unlocking in his chest. Pathways that had resisted him before now revealed themselves, glowing veins of light that invited his tools inward. He broke the contact, gasping, sweat dripping down his temples, but the system remained open. Zephyra withdrew her hand slowly, her eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made his chest tighten. "It accepted you," she said quietly. "That has never happened before." Jake blinked, his voice hoarse. "Never?" "Not with any outsider," she confirmed. Her ears flickered in a pattern he was beginning to recognize as conflicted emotion. "You are the first." The realization settled between them with more weight than any battlefield oath. Jake turned back to his tools, hands steady once more, but his thoughts were anything but calm. The armor hadn't just allowed him access, it had chosen him in some small way. And in the quiet pulse of the crystalline chamber, Jake wondered if the Queen herself felt the same shift that now thrummed through him. The pathways lay open before him now, shimmering like veins of light woven through the Queen's armor. For the first time since he'd begun, the system didn't resist his presence. Instead, it pulsed with a steady rhythm that felt almost welcoming, as if it had acknowledged him as something other than an intruder. Jake leaned in, guiding the micro-manipulators with steady precision, following the glowing conduits as they wound deep into the armor's living structure. "This is extraordinary," he murmured, adjusting a fractured node that flickered like a broken star. "The pathways aren't just transmitting signals, they're carrying memory?" Fragments of thought, emotions like echoes of you. Zephyra remained silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter than usual, stripped of its usual regal weight. "The armor remembers every battle I have fought, every fear I have mastered, every loss I have endured. It is not only my weapon, it is my witness." Jake's hands slowed at the weight of her words. He wasn't just repairing damaged circuits. He was touching the record of her life, the living testament of a queen who had carried the fate of star systems on her shoulders. Each spark of energy under his probe felt personal. "Sacred, then I'll treat it with respect," he said softly. More to himself than to her, the next fracture was the deepest, set along a node that pulsed dangerously with unstable energy. As Jake approached it, the armor reacted, not with hostility but with something else, a sudden surge of emotional resonance that hit him like a wave. His breath caught as foreign sensations bled into his mind, determination hardened by loss, pride laced with weariness, and beneath it all, a loneliness so vast it ached. He staggered, nearly dropping his tool. "God, I felt that." "Zephyra, I felt you." Her elongated ears shifted in rapid patterns, betraying agitation she didn't voice. "The synchronization has not faded completely." The armor is still sharing its perception. What you feel are reflections of me. Jake steadied himself, but the flood continued. Not words. Not images, but emotions, raw and unfiltered, pouring into him with every adjustment. And then, just as startling, he realized it wasn't only one way. His own thoughts were bleeding into the bond, carried back through the open pathways. He could sense it in the way the armor pulsed in response, mirroring his intent. Zephra's eyes opened wide, her voice low. "It sees you as well." Jake froze, a chill running down his spine. His guarded resolve, his awe of her, even the nervous quickening of his heartbeat, all of it was exposed to her through the armor. And judging by her silence, she could feel it as clearly as he felt her. For a moment, the chamber was charged with more than energy. Every movement of his hands carried layers of meaning now, each adjustment an unspoken confession. When he sealed the final fracture, stabilizing the node, the light along the queen's spine flared brilliantly before settling into a smooth, balanced glow. "It's done," Jake whispered, withdrawing his tools with hands that trembled despite his steady work. "The core junction is whole again." Zephra rose from the crystalline platform, her armor flowing with flawless precision as though it had never been damaged. She moved with slow deliberation, testing each motion, and then she stilled, her gaze fixed squarely on him. "You touched more than my armor, Captain Reeves," she said, her voice carrying a resonance that was neither entirely stern nor entirely gentle. "You touched what no one outside my people has ever been permitted to feel," Jake exhaled shakily, caught between pride, fear, and something else he couldn't name. The synchronization had ended, yet the memory of her emotions lingered in him, and the awareness that his own had lingered in her was impossible to shake, for better or worse. Neither of them would ever be the same. The crystalline chamber shifted as Zephra activated the trial sequence. The walls folded back, revealing a vast arena of light and shifting constructs. Holodrones emerged, their forms twisting into mock predators, armored soldiers, and mechanized beasts drawn from a dozen different worlds. Each one radiated hostile intent, programmed to test her armor to its limits. Jake stood at the edge of the platform, tension thrumming through him as he watched her step forward. The armor clung to her frame like liquid fire, flowing seamlessly with every movement. For the first time since he'd seen her wounded, she looked whole, radiant, commanding, untouchable. Yet he couldn't shake the memory of her emotions echoing through him, the ache of loneliness he had felt as if it were his own. Zephra raised her hand. The first wave struck. The drones moved like a storm, claws and weapons flashing. In response, her armor bloomed outward in shimmering plates, forming an exoskeletal shield that deflected the assault with brutal efficiency. She countered in a blur of movement, every strike precise, every defense flawless. Sparks and shards of light filled the chamber as she dismantled the first wave with effortless grace. But Jake noticed something. The armor pulsed differently now, not only in rhythm with her will, but faintly echoing his own heartbeat. Each time his breath quickened, the armor flared brighter, as if drawing on his presence as well. A second wave emerged, more dangerous, swarming her from every angle. Jake's instincts screamed warnings, his hands tightening at his sides. And the armor responded. Without him touching a console, without him issuing a command, it shifted, forming a barrier an instant before a drone strike could land. Zephra's head snapped toward him, her eyes widening even as she fought. "You are still linked," she called, her voice sharp over the clash. "The armor hears you." Jake staggered back, realization hitting hard. Somehow, the synchronization hadn't fully severed. His instincts, his emotions, his protective surge of adrenaline, the armor was pulling it all in, weaving his reactions into her movements. He wasn't just a bystander. He was inside the fight with her. "Then let's use it," he shouted back, focusing with every ounce of discipline he had. He tried to calm his breathing, to sharpen his awareness, imagining every strike and counter as if he were wearing the armor himself. Zephra moved faster, smoother, her blows landing with the precision of two minds acting in unison. The drones fell one by one, their bodies dissolving into streams of light. The final wave came, a colossal war form, 3 times her size, bristling with cannons and bladed limbs. It slammed into the arena floor with enough force to make the chamber shudder. Jake's pulse raced, fear lancing through him. But he forced his focus tighter, narrowing on the queen's movements. Willing her armor to meet the challenge, she leapt, dodged, struck, and the armor roared with power. Shields forming before the warform's cannons fired, blades sharpening in her gauntlets at the exact moment she needed them. It wasn't just her skill anymore. It was their combined will, flowing into the living armor like a single command. With a final, devastating strike, Zephyr drove her armored fist through the warform's chest. The construct shattered into shards of light, dissolving into the air. The arena quieted, leaving only the sound of her breathing and Jake's, echoing in unison. Zephyr stood tall, her armor glowing with renewed strength. Slowly, she turned to him, her gaze heavy with meaning. "This should not be possible," she said, her voice low but steady. "Yet you fought with me, as though the armor were yours as much as mine?" Jake's chest tightened. He had felt every blow, every surge of power, as if he were inside the fight himself. The bond hadn't ended with the repairs, it had evolved into something neither of them fully understood. "Then maybe," he said quietly, meeting her eyes, "this armor didn't just accept me. Maybe it chose us both." For a long moment she didn't reply. The chamber hummed softly around them, carrying the weight of a truth neither could ignore. They were no longer separate. In the armor's eyes, they were one. The arena dissolved back into the crystalline walls of the chamber, but the silence that followed was heavier than the clash of any battle. Zephyr stood still, her armor retracting into a subtle shimmer along her skin, her gaze fixed on Jake with an intensity that made the air between them feel charged. The simulation had proven what she already feared. The bond was not an accident. It was permanent, alive, and undeniable. "You do not understand what this means," she said at last, her voice measured yet carrying a strain that cracked the edges of her composure. "Among my people, the bond between sovereign and armor is sacred. It is not shared. It is not divided. And now," she paused, her elongated ears shifting with conflicted emotion. "Now the armor answers to you as much as it answers to me. This is unacceptable, impossible, dangerous." Jake swallowed, struggling to find the right words. "I didn't ask for this, Zephyr. I only wanted to save you, to repair what was broken. Whatever happened between me and the armor, it wasn't planned. But maybe it happened for a reason." Her eyes narrowed, not in anger but in something far more complicated. "You speak like a man who has never carried a crown. The reason may not matter. The council will not see this as fate. They will see it as contamination." Jake felt the weight of it then, not just the strangeness of their connection, but its political implications. If the Queen's armor had chosen an outsider, a human, what would her people say? Would they still trust her as their sovereign, or would they see her as compromised? Worse, would they see him as a usurper, an interloper who had stolen what no foreigner was ever meant to touch? "Then tell them the truth," Jake said, stepping closer, his voice steadier than he felt. "Tell them you live because of me. That the armor lives because of me. If they want to call that contamination, fine. But maybe they'll see it for what it is, proof that your people don't stand alone. That the bond can be more than tradition. It can be strength." Zephyr's lips pressed into a thin line, her gaze searching his face for an answer even she didn't have. He could feel her emotions still faintly bleeding into him, uncertainty, pride, fear, and beneath it all, a quiet thread of something softer that she guarded fiercely. "Strength," she repeated, almost to herself. "Yes, but it will divide the council. Some will call for your execution to sever the bond. Others will demand you remain at my side." As if you were consort or co-sovereign, Jake's chest tightened at the word. "Consort?" Her ears flickered, betraying a flicker of discomfort. "The armor does not bind lightly, Captain Reeves. It does not mistake instinct for truth. It has seen you. It has chosen you. And now, whether we will it or not, my people will see that choice written in every movement I make." The weight of her words pressed down on him, heavier than any battlefield burden he had carried. He hadn't just saved her life, He had entwined it with his own in a way that could never be undone. His fate was now bound to hers, not just in secret, but in the eyes of an empire. Jake drew a slow breath, meeting her gaze without flinching. Then I'll stand with you. Whatever it means. Whatever it costs. If the armor chose us, then maybe it's because we were meant to face what comes next together. For the first time, Zephrah's mask of command wavered. She looked at him not as a queen judging a soldier, but as a woman seeing the man who had stepped into her storm and refused to leave. Her armor pulsed faintly at her side, echoing the shared bond like a second heartbeat. Together? She repeated, her voice soft but unyielding, and in that moment, they both understood the bond was not just survival. It was destiny. A destiny that would challenge empires, reshape alliances, and test the fragile line between loyalty and something far deeper, the queen and the captain, bound by armor, bound by fate. And in the silent glow of the crystalline chamber, the war beyond their world suddenly felt closer than ever. The chamber doors slid open with a hiss, shattering the fragile stillness that lingered between Jake and Zephrah. 3 Astrian guards stepped inside, their armor etched with sharp geometric patterns that pulsed with authority. Behind them came Counselor Thryn, his presence heavy as a storm front. He was tall, gaunt, his ears adorned with the gilded rings of political mastery, and his eyes held none of Zephrah's fire, only cold calculation. "Your Majesty," Thryn said, his voice like steel wrapped in silk. "The Council has been informed of an anomaly." His gaze drifted to Jake, the human standing too close, far too close, to the Queen, and it seems the whispers were true. The armor recognizes him. Zephrah's posture stiffened. She was queen here, sovereign beyond dispute, yet even she could not deny the truth now. The armor itself betrayed her, glowing faintly at Jake's side, its bioluminescent patterns shifting in rhythm with his presence. A murmur rippled through the guards, not quite hostility, but unease, as if they were watching something forbidden. "This is no anomaly," Zephrah said firmly, her voice carrying the weight of command. "Captain Reeves saved my life. Without his interference, the neural fractures would have unraveled my bond entirely. The armor's connection to him is not corruption. It is consequence." Thryn's lip curled in the faintest sneer. "And what the people will see, my queen, is that their sovereign has been touched, tainted by an outsider. The sanctity of your lineage compromised by a human's hand." He stepped closer, ignoring Jake as though he were an insect buzzing in the background. "The Council will demand resolution. They may even call for his execution." Jake's fists clenched at his sides, but Zephrah lifted a hand, halting him before he could speak. Her gaze never left Thryn's. "Let them demand what they will. I am queen, not a puppet, and I do not discard those who risk their lives to protect me." The words struck Jake harder than he expected, threading through the tension like a vow. But even as pride rose in his chest, he saw the danger in Thryn's expression, not defeated, but calculating, storing her defiance like a blade he would wield later. "Then know this," Thryn said coldly, his gaze flicking to Jake for the first time, sharp as a blade. "If the armor truly binds you to this human, then his fate is tied to yours. Should he falter, should he fail, it is not only his life that will shatter. It will be yours, and the Empire with it." The counselor swept from the chamber, the guards following in rigid silence. The doors sealed shut once more, leaving Zephrah and Jake in the echo of his warning. For a long moment neither spoke. The hum of the chamber filled the air, and the pulse of the armor glowed between them like a living heartbeat. Finally, Zephrah turned to Jake, her voice low, her control fraying just enough for him to hear the truth beneath her words. "You see now, Captain, what binds us is no simple repair. It is a bond the Empire itself will seek to test, to break, perhaps even to destroy. And I fear—" Her ears flickered with the soft hues of conflicted emotion. "I fear that what begins as survival may end as war." Jake stepped closer, refusing to let fear be the last word. "Then we face it together. You and me. Whatever they throw at us." Zephrah's eyes lingered on him, and for the first time, the Queen of the Astrians allowed herself a single breath of weakness, a flicker of hope. "Together," she whispered again, but this time, It carried not just promise, but peril. The council chamber was a cathedral of crystal and shadow, its soaring arches designed to dwarf even the proudest sovereign. Dozens of Astrian counselors filled the curved tiers, their garments alive with shifting light patterns that reflected rank and allegiance. Jake stood at Zephyr's side, the only human in a room that felt like a crucible. Every eye was on him, some filled with suspicion, others with open hostility. "The matter is clear," Counselor Thrin's voice rang out, sharp and cold, carrying easily across the chamber. "The Queen's armor, the sacred bond of our people, has been compromised. This outsider has entwined himself with what is ours. Our traditions, our sovereignty, our very identity, polluted." His words drew a ripple of agreement, voices hissing like blades sliding free of scabbards. Zephyr rose from her throne at the chamber's center, her presence commanding silence. The crystalline walls seemed to amplify her voice, every syllable resonating with authority. "Polluted? You speak as though I am a child tricked by foreign hands. This human risked his life to save mine. He stepped into a danger none of you would dare face. And because of that, I stand here alive. The armor still breathes with me. Without him, your queen would be ash and memory." Jake kept silent, jaw tight, resisting the urge to speak. This wasn't his battle to win with words, not yet. But he could feel the armor pulsing faintly at his side, resonating with Zephyr's voice. As if the bond itself rejected the accusations, Counselor Saris, one of the oldest and most revered, leaned forward. Her ears bore no ornaments, her authority carved instead from centuries of wisdom. "What you claim, Majesty, may be true. Yet the bond is no longer singular." The armor's light bleeds toward him. "We all see it." Her gaze fell on Jake, and the chamber followed. The glow was faint but undeniable, bioluminescent tendrils flickering along his forearm, responding to his presence. "Such a thing has never happened in our history. What are we to make of it?" Whispers spread like wildfire, rising in volume until the chamber quivered with discord. Some called for Jake's banishment. Others demanded ritual severance, a process Jake didn't understand. But the word carried weight, and Zephyr's jaw clenched at its mention. Then came the harsher voices, calls for his execution, to end the contamination before it spread. Jake finally stepped forward, the weight of every hostile gaze pressing on him. His voice was steady, though his pulse hammered in his ears. "You call me a contaminant, a danger, but you're all ignoring the truth. Your queen asked me to help. I did. And in the process, I didn't weaken her bond. I strengthened it. The armor's alive, isn't it? Maybe it saw something in me. Maybe it chose this bond because it knew your queen needed more than tradition. She needed an ally." The chamber erupted again, outrage and confusion colliding in a storm of voices. Thrin's face twisted with fury, but Zephyr raised a hand, and silence crashed back like a wave. Her gaze swept the chamber, unyielding, imperial. "The armor chose," she said, voice like a blade cutting through doubt. "And I will not defy it. You may fear what you do not understand, but I will not discard the one who saved me. If the council insists on challenging this bond, then you challenge me. Your queen, your sovereign. And make no mistake," her voice sharpened, fire blazing in her eyes, "I do not bow to fear. Not yours. Not anyone's." The silence that followed was electric, charged with danger. Jake realized, as the counselors exchanged dark glances, that Zephyr had done more than defend him. She had declared war, not against enemies beyond the stars, but against her own council if they dared move against them. And in that moment, he understood. Whatever destiny the armor had bound them to, it was no longer just survival. It was rebellion. ***, the chamber's crystalline silence did not last. Counselor Thrin's eyes gleamed like polished obsidian, cold and hungry. He stepped forward, his voice laced with venom wrapped in formality. "If you defy tradition, Majesty, then you defy the foundation upon which your throne stands. You may command the loyalty of your soldiers, but the council is the soul of Astria. And tonight the soul rejects this corruption." The words were a signal. Jake felt it before he saw it, a ripple in the air, the subtle vibration of armor activating. Half a dozen counselors rose from their seats, their guards moving as one, hands igniting plasma blades that hissed like serpents in the crystalline air. This wasn't debate anymore. It was treachery sharpened and unsheathed. Zephyra moved instantly, her armor flaring alive with a brilliance that painted the chamber in living light. Plates flowed across her body like molten metal, locking into lethal form. Her eyes burned, not with fear but with the cold fury of a sovereign betrayed. "You dare raise arms against your queen?" Her voice cracked like thunder, the chamber itself trembling with her wrath. Jake had no armor, no weapon but the bond. Yet even as blades swung toward him, the armor pulsed in recognition, threads of bioluminescence crawling across his skin. A gauntlet of light shimmered into existence around his hand, crude but real, a mirror of Zephyra's warplate. Gasps tore from the council tiers, the proof undeniable. The human was not intruder. He was chosen. Jake. Zephyra's command snapped like a whip, even as she struck down the first traitor with terrifying grace. "The bond will answer you, trust it." He did. Instinct replaced hesitation. As a guard lunged, Jake raised his arm and the armor responded. A shield of crystalline energy flared into being, the impact shattering light across the chamber, but leaving him standing. His heart hammered in disbelief, but the bond whispered strength into his bones. Moving him with a warrior's reflexes he had never trained for, the chamber erupted into chaos. Zephyra was a tempest, her strikes fluid and merciless, every movement amplified by the living machine that clung to her skin. Jake fought beside her, clumsy compared to her deadly elegance, but the armor filled his gaps, guided his instincts, turning survival into defiance. Together, they were more than sovereign and outsider. They were a single rhythm, a single force. Counselors screamed, some fleeing, others rallying to Thrin's banner. The old counselor himself did not fight. He watched, eyes burning with fanatic conviction, as if every death was fuel for his cause. "Do you not see?" he shouted above the carnage. "This is what comes of the bond. A human wielding what belongs only to Astria. He is corruption made flesh, and she—" He pointed at Zephyra, his voice cracking with rage. "She is no queen, but a traitor to her bloodline." Zephyra cut through the last of the rebels, her armor gleaming with battle's fury. She turned her gaze on Thrin, voice like a blade honed on betrayal. "No, Thrin! The only traitor here is you." Jake felt the armor hum, syncing with hers, two heartbeats resonating as one. The council chamber was a battlefield now, and whatever fragile order had once held Astria together was shattered as silence fell, broken bodies smoldering in the crystalline light. Jake realized the truth that would ripple across the empire. There was no going back. Zephyra had chosen him. The armor had chosen them both. And Astria itself would either break under the weight of that truth or be reforged by it. Asterisk. The council chamber smelled of scorched crystal and blood. Bodies of fallen guards and counselors lay where they had fallen, their armor flickering out in dying pulses of light. The survivors huddled in silence, too stunned or too afraid to speak. Jake stood among them, chest heaving, the faint glow of alien armor still clinging to his arm like a phantom limb. He could feel Zephyra's presence in it, not just beside him, but within him, the bond humming like a second heartbeat. Zephyra stood at the chamber's center, her armor retracting slowly, plates dissolving into the shimmer of her skin. She looked less like a queen in that moment and more like a warrior who had bled for her throne. Her eyes swept across the survivors, hard as forged steel. "You have seen the truth with your own eyes. Treachery festers in these halls, and it has struck not only at me, but at Astria itself. Those who betrayed us lie at your feet. Those who live must choose where they stand." Counselor Cerise, the elder who had spoken with caution before, rose slowly from her seat. Her movements carried the weight of centuries, yet her voice was clear and unbroken. "The bond cannot be denied. Whatever doubts we carry, whatever fears, this chamber has witnessed what no Astrian has ever seen. The armor has chosen him. To deny it now is to deny the will of the bond itself." Murmurs spread again, but this time they were uncertain, fractured. Some nodded in reluctant acceptance. Others shook their heads in disbelief, their faces pale as glass. The Empire's foundation was crumbling before Jake's eyes. And he realized what Zephyra had warned him of. Survival was no longer the question. Power itself was. Jake stepped forward, his voice steady, though every instinct screamed that he had no right to speak here. I didn't come to steal your traditions. I didn't ask for this bond. But I won't apologize for saving your queen, and I won't run from what's happened. You can call me a contaminant, a mistake, whatever you want, but the truth is, your queen is stronger with me than without me. And if Astria can't see that, then maybe your empire was weaker than you believed. The chamber rippled with shock. Some counselors bristled with fury, others looked shaken, but none could deny the weight of his words. Zephyra's armor pulsed faintly, echoing his conviction. As though the bond itself agreed, Thrin's faction was broken but not gone. Even as he was dragged away in chains, his voice carried venom, promising that the Empire would rise against this corruption. His words hung like poison in the air, a warning that the battle was far from over. When the chamber finally emptied, leaving only Zephyra and Jake beneath the crystalline arches, silence stretched between them. She looked at him, her expression unreadable, yet her voice was softer than the fury she had shown moments before. Do you understand what you've done, Captain? You did not just survive the council. You divided it. You placed yourself at the heart of Astria's future. Jake met her gaze, the weight of the moment heavy on his shoulders. Then I guess I'd better not let you down. For the first time since their bond had formed, Zephyra's stern mask faltered. Her ears flickered with hues he had learned to recognize as conflict, but also trust. No, she said quietly, almost to herself. You cannot. Not now. Not ever. And as the hum of the armor pulsed between them, Jake knew the truth. Astria was no longer united. But neither was it lost. It was changing, reshaping itself around a bond that no law, no tradition, and no council could ever undo. The fractures of the council had not healed. In the days that followed, whispers of rebellion spread like cracks through glass, spiderwebbing across the empire. Some worlds swore loyalty to Zephyra and her bonded human, seeing in their union a sign of destiny. Others recoiled in fury, branding Jake an abomination, a parasite leeching off Astria's sacred traditions. The empire that had stood unchallenged for millennia now trembled at its very core, but Astria was not the only power stirring. As if summoned by blood in the water, an ancient enemy stirred at the edge of known space. Reports began to trickle in, outposts falling silent. Border patrols vanishing, refugee ships arriving with hulls scarred and crews half-mad with terror. They spoke of shadows in the void, of vessels that devoured light itself, of a war fleet older than Astria, older than human history. Zephyra received the first confirmed transmission in her war room, surrounded by officers whose faces were carved from stone. The holomap lit with trembling icons as a battered frigate broadcast its final message. They are back. The Ozith have awakened. Their forges burn again. The first clash came sooner than anyone expected. Astria's border outpost, Veros Station, was a fortress carved into the bones of a shattered moon, a bastion that had never fallen in living memory. Its cannons had once repelled pirate fleets and rogue warlords, but against the Ozith, they may as well have been sparks against the night. Jake stood on the command deck of the Aurelis, Zephyra's flagship, as the first sensor readings flickered in. Dozens of enemy signatures appeared. Then hundreds. Then thousands. The display strained to keep pace, red icons blotting out starlight as the Ozith swarm emerged from the void. They weren't ships in any sense Jake understood. They looked like titanic organisms clad in blackened alloys, hulls pulsing as if alive, their edges melting into shadow. Some crawled on spindly limbs of metal and bone, while others moved like predators swimming through water, their bodies studded with cannons that glowed with the heat of dying suns. A nervous Astrian officer whispered, "The forges live again." And silence fell over the bridge like a funeral bell. Zephyr's voice cut through the fear. Signal Veros. All batteries to full charge. Fighters to launch positions. The line must hold until the fleet is ready. Her command left no room for hesitation, but Jake could feel the bond humming in her, tightening like a clenched fist. She remembered this enemy. She had been raised on their legend, their horror. Jake forced his voice steady, stepping forward. If they're alive, they can bleed. If they bleed, we can kill them. The human simplicity of it earned him a few startled glances, but also a flicker of courage in the eyes of the younger officers. The first Ozith ship descended on Vero Station with a shriek of tortured space. The fortress unleashed its fire, lances of plasma, storms of missiles, beams of concentrated starlight, the kind of firepower that should have torn fleets apart. But the Ozith absorbed it, their hulls writhing as wounds closed with grotesque speed. Then, with a pulse of dark energy, the swarm answered. Entire batteries on Veros went dark in an instant. As though swallowed by shadow, the bridge shook as the Aurelius fired its main cannon, a beam that carved one Ozith vessel apart. It screamed, as though alive before dissolving into fragments that melted into nothing. For a heartbeat, hope sparked. And then the swarm surged, dozens replacing the one that fell. "Zephyra," Jake muttered, his fists tight. "This isn't a fleet." "It's a plague," her jaw said hard. "And plagues burn," the order went out, and Astrian fighters launched in wave-sleek, needle-like craft dancing among the monstrous swarm. Jake watched as the pilots fought bravely, their weapons carving wounds that closed too quickly, their squadrons disappearing one by one into the endless tide. For every Ozith vessel destroyed, 10 more pressed forward. The bond pulsed violently within Jake, his armor flaring faintly as though urging him forward. He turned to Zephyra, the weight of inevitability heavy in his chest. "We can't just hold the line. We need to find the heart of them, whatever keeps this swarm alive. If we fight them ship for ship, Astria falls." Zephyra met his gaze, and for a moment the war and chaos vanished. The bond sharpened between them, her resolve becoming his. "Then we will find their heart, Captain. Even if it lies in the abyss itself." The Aurelius dove into the thick of the battle, its hull blazing with fire as the Ozith closed in. The first war for Astria's survival had begun, and already Jake knew. This was not just a fight for victory. This was a fight to uncover a weakness, or watch 2 civilizations drown in shadow. When the last echoes of battle faded, the void around Vero Station looked like a graveyard of broken light. The swarm had withdrawn, not defeated, but testing, probing like predators circling prey to taste its fear. The Astrian fleet had survived, though at a cost that would haunt them. Nearly a third of their fighters were gone, Veros itself burned, and the silence on the channels carried the weight of names that would never be spoken again. On the command deck of the Aurelius, the air felt heavy with grief. Officers worked in silence, their eyes avoiding the casualty reports scrolling across the displays. Even hardened veterans bore the look of soldiers who had glimpsed the edge of an abyss that might never. Close. Jake leaned over the tactical table, his face drawn, every muscle aching from the bond's relentless demands during battle. "They didn't come to win," he said softly, almost to himself. "They came to measure us." To see what Astria, what humanity, could do, Zephyra stood rigid beside him, her silhouette sharp against the wounded stars. Her armor still pulsed faintly with the lingering resonance of battle, like a living creature that hadn't stopped trembling. "The Ozith always test before they consume," she said. "What you saw was a shadow of their true strength. When they return, they will bring the full swarm." Before Jake could answer, the council's signal flared across the chamber, a direct summons from the Astrian High Conclave. The holographic chamber filled with towering figures, lords, generals, and advisors, each bearing the sharp grace of Astrian nobility. Their expressions varied, some grim, some furious, some openly hostile. "Queen Zephyra," intoned High Chancellor Varian, his silver eyes narrowing, "we warned you that entangling Astria with humans invited disaster. And here it is, the Ozith awoken, our defenses bleeding, our fleets tested. Tell us, did the human captain whisper this doom into your ear?" Murmurs rippled through the council chamber. Several pairs of eyes turned on Jake like knives. He stood straighter, meeting their gazes without flinching. "I didn't awaken them," he said evenly, "but I fought them. And if you think Astria can survive this storm alone, you're lying to yourselves. You need every ally you can get. Even me, some scoffed. Others studied him with wary curiosity. Varian's lip curled in disdain. A human offering strategy to the heirs of 1,000 victories? You presume much, Captain. Zephyr's voice cut across the chamber like tempered steel. He presumes nothing. I chose him. And when the swarm came, he stood at my side while many of your fleets held back, waiting to see if the Queen would fall. The accusation hung heavy in the silence that followed. The council erupted into chaos, some shouting in outrage at her words, others demanding proof, a few daring to agree. Jake caught the flicker of politics beneath the anger. Zephyr's rule was being tested, not just by the Ozith, but by those who saw opportunity in crisis. Then a quiet voice rose, one that silenced the others. Archon Celera, oldest among them, her body etched with scars of wars long past. The Ozith have returned. Whether by fate or folly, the human is here. Question his origins later if you must. But for now, Astria needs fighters, not accusations. Her words forced a brittle truce in the chamber. The council dissolved, but not without leaving Jake with the lingering burn of suspicion in their stares. When the chamber cleared, Zephyra turned to him, her armor dimming to a soft glow. You are a symbol now, she said, her voice low. To some, hope. To others, the knife at Astria's throat. Jake exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand across his tired face. I didn't ask to be either. No, Zephyra said, her gaze locked on him, intense and unyielding. But choice has little meaning in the tides of history. The bond chose. And now we both carry its weight. Outside the viewport, the swarm's retreat left the stars deceptively peaceful. But Jake felt it. Through the bond, through the silence, through the dread that clung to every Astrian heart. The Ozith had measured them. And soon they would return. Asterisk, the council's brittle truce did not last long. Whispers traveled faster than light within the spires of Astria, whispers that painted Jake Reeves as an omen, a curse, a weapon that had been carelessly brought into the heart of their empire. In the polished halls of the High Conclave, strategies were spoken aloud, but in the corridors beneath them, plots were already taking shape. Jake felt the shift before he saw it. The stares lingered longer when he walked through the fleet's docking bays. The salutes from Astrian officers grew shorter, sharper, some laced with the subtle disdain that didn't need words. Once, a supply runner accidentally dropped a crate of volatile crystals at his feet. Another time, a maintenance drone malfunctioned in a corridor, its energy saw cutting a little too close to his throat before Zephyr's guards intervened. None of it could be proven deliberate. All of it felt like a tightening noose. Zephyra noticed, too. One night in the crystalline sanctum of the Aurelies, she told him bluntly, there are those who will not wait for the Ozith to destroy you, Captain. They will strike first to preserve their vision of Astria. Her ears flickered with a cold light that betrayed more anger than she spoke aloud. Even now, they fear the bond more than they fear the swarm. Jake gave a bitter laugh. I've been stabbed in back alleys before, but never while staring at a galactic apocalypse. Guess there's a first for everything. The attempt came sooner than either expected. Jake had been summoned to oversee repairs on the forward hangars, a task that should have been routine. But as he moved between the scaffolds, alarms trilled. Too late. Explosions ripped through the supports, sending burning fragments crashing down. The blast threw him across the deck, his armor flaring instinctively to absorb the impact. He staggered up, coughing smoke, just in time to see 3 Astrian soldiers emerge from the haze, blades of hardened plasma humming in their hands. Their commander sneered. The human curse ends here. Astria belongs to Astrians.